Apotheosis Chapter 18. However, this was still within the Blue Cloud sect. Presumably, they wouldn't dare to go too far. Thinking of this, Luo Zheng walked towards Mo Can. Mo Can lay on the ground, his face deathly pale. He panted heavily and said to Luo Zheng, "Brother Luo Zheng, keep running. I don't think I'll be able to get up." What a pity. Generally, a bone refining stage cultivator only needs to run 10 li. As long as I persist for another 1 or 2 li, I'll be able to pass the C test. I'm very sorry. I've implicated you, Luo Zheng said apologetically. It was true that someone had caused trouble for him, which had implicated Mo Can. Mo Can waved his hand and said with a sad face, "Forget it. This is my fate. Since I was born, my fate has been full of misfortune. I've already gotten used to it." Listening to Mo Can's words, it seemed that he had experienced many hardships in the past. "Stand up," Luo Zheng said seriously. Mo Can shook his head and said with a bitter smile, "I can't stand up." "If you haven't tried, how do you know you can't stand up? The purpose of cultivating martial arts is to squeeze out the limits of our bodies. Who can peacefully train to the peak?" Luo Zheng said with a raised voice. Luo Zheng's words entered his ears. Cultivating martial arts was absolutely not for glory, wealth, or power. It was for the ultimate strength of martial arts. This path was full of thorns and was destined to be extremely difficult. Therefore, the most important thing was to surpass oneself and force oneself to break through the limits. Hearing Luo Zheng's words, Mo Can pondered for a while. His smiling face was especially solemn. Then he nodded. "You're right. If I give up so easily, I'm afraid it'll be difficult for me to step into the Blue Cloud sect next time. I have to seize this opportunity. As long as I can enter the Blue Cloud sect, I, Mo Can, will have the hope of turning things around. Only then will I have the hope of standing out." After saying that, Mo Can gritted his teeth and stood up from the ground. Although he staggered, he eventually stabilized his body and slowly moved forward on the road. There was only 1 mile left in front of him. The road was flat, but for Mo Can, it was as difficult as climbing a mountain of blades. Luo Zheng slowed down and followed behind Mo Can, constantly encouraging him. At this time, Mo Can's body had suffered internal injuries, and his physical strength had been completely depleted. He was on the verge of collapse, and he was completely relying on his willpower to support himself. There were several times when Mo Can was on the verge of collapsing. He clenched his teeth so hard that they bled, but in the end, he managed to pull through. "Come on. I saw the stone tablet in front of us before," Luo Zheng said. Not far ahead, there was a stone tablet with 2 big words engraved on it. 10 li. 10 miles was the goal of the bone refining stage. As long as one crossed this distance, the jade pendant would change color. Luo Zheng saw several cultivators in the bone refining realm. After crossing this goal, they chose to leave. They had already passed the exam. Hearing Luo Zheng's words, Mo Can's expression became excited. He saw that his body was like an oil lamp, but he didn't know where a surge of energy came from, and he actually began to jog. When Mo Can walked past the 10 li stone tablet, the jade pendant on his chest finally turned red. He had passed the C test. He couldn't hold on any longer. With a plop, he fell to the ground. He couldn't even move his fingers, but he still said to Luo Zheng, "Brother Luo Zheng, thank you." Luo Zheng nodded at him. At this time, a flying chariot flew over from the sky. 2 examiners from the Blue Cloud sect jumped down from it. They sized up Mo Can's jade pendant and announced that Mo Can had passed the test. Then, they lifted Mo Can onto the flying chariot. At the same time, they sized up Luo Zheng and quickly left. The 2 examiners were a little surprised. Strictly speaking, Everyone who participated in the C test was a competitor because there was still a trial test coming up. Who would be willing to help their competitor? This kid was a weirdo. Luo Zheng naturally didn't know what the examiners were thinking. He only felt gratified when he saw that Mo Can had passed the test. Then, he also stepped forward and crossed the stone tablet. As soon as he stepped over, his body sank, and he suddenly felt the pressure double. 2000 gene of pressure. It turned out that every 10 li on this path would double the pressure. Luo Zheng adapted a few steps and moved his arms and legs. The 2000 gene of pressure still had some effect on Luo Zheng. At the very least, his movements were twice as slow. However, his physique was different from ordinary people. Running 5 li under this pressure wasn't a big problem for him. Because he had been walking slowly with Mo Can, he had wasted a lot of time. The bone refining stage cultivators had passed the C test at the 10 li mark. The viscera refining stage cultivators had already run far away. Only Luo Zheng was left alone on the path. Maintaining a uniform speed, Luo Zheng trotted forward like a lonely traveler. After 3 li, Luo Zheng was slightly panting. After 5 li, Luo Zheng's breathing became slightly louder. After 8 li, Luo Zheng's breathing was slightly chaotic. However, the goal was in sight. It looked like he would pass the C test easily. However, when Luo Zheng reached the 9 li mark, he saw 4 people standing in front of him. One of them was the brawny man who had bumped into Luo Zheng and Mo Can with his shoulder. The other 3 were unfamiliar faces. However, judging from the aura they emitted, they were undoubtedly in the marrow refining stage. With the previous encounter, Luo Zheng naturally understood that these people wouldn't let him. When he was 1 zhang away from the 4 people, a young man dressed like a scholar stepped forward and made a gesture to stop him. Your C test ends here. Don't go any further. Luo Zheng was surprised that they didn't directly attack him. Therefore, Luo Zheng pretended to be astonished and asked, "Why does it end here? Who sent you?" The scholar smiled. "I don't need to answer this question. You only need to know that this is your destination." The 4 of them were all in the marrow refining stage. If they wanted to stop a viscera refining stage cultivator, it would be too easy. Luo Zheng's face revealed a gloomy expression. He muttered, "But I still haven't passed the C test. What do I do?" "That's your problem." When the scholar finished speaking, the 4 of them had mocking expressions on their faces. This kid was clearly still thinking about the C test. Dream on. At this moment, Luo Zheng suddenly looked at the sky behind the 4 people and shouted, "Ah, the examiner is coming in the flying carriage." The examiner of the Blue Cloud sect was still a bit of a deterrent to them. The 4 of them unconsciously turned their heads. In that instant, Luo Zheng suddenly took a step forward and rushed forward. His entire body suddenly exploded with power. Like an arrow released from a bow, he almost instantly overtook the 4 people and rushed forward. The 4 of them turned around to look, but the sky was empty. Where was the flying chariot and the examiner? Realizing that they had been played, the 4 of them flew into a rage out of humiliation. This kid is treacherous. Humph, do you think you can outrun us? Once we catch him, we'll cripple his legs first. Let's see where he can run to. Luo Zheng turned a deaf ear to the voices behind him. A faint smile hung on his face as he pushed his body's strength to the limit and madly ran forward. A li was only 500 meters. With Luo Zheng's full speed, 500 meters took only a few breaths of time. However, even though Luo Zheng's running speed was extremely fast, the 4 people chasing him were not slow either. It was unknown what kind of cultivation technique the scholar practiced, but his body was flickering with a green light. His feet contained the power of wind and thunder. He was even faster than Luo Zheng, and he quickly approached Luo Zheng's back. A mere viscera refining stage cultivator wants to play tricks with us. In front of absolute power, your little tricks are nothing. Dark fog palm. Die for me. That person threw himself at Luo Zheng's back. The azure light in his hand flickered as he struck out with his palm, landing squarely on Luo Zheng's back. The full power of a refining stage cultivator's attack was extraordinary. Not only did this palm contain an enormous amount of power, it also contained a wisp of azure smoke that entered Luo Zheng's body. That azure smoke was highly toxic. Even an elephant would die instantly after inhaling a mouthful of this dark fog palm. Not to mention that the dark fog palm had directly entered this kid's body. Heh, you won't be able to run more than 2 steps before you fall to the ground. The scholar was very proud of his success. Unfortunately, the scene he had imagined didn't happen. How is this possible? The scholar's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He had used all of his strength in that palm strike. With his refining stage strength, it was enough to smash Luo Zheng's internal organs into mincemeat. Not to mention, that palm strike contained the highly toxic dark fog palm. However, Luo Zheng was still running forward as if nothing had happened. He even borrowed the strength of the scholar's palm strike to increase his speed. What kind of monster was this kid? The 4 of them stared at each other. Apart from shock, there was only shock on their faces. At this moment, Luo Zheng felt extremely refreshed. Ever since Luo Zheng's body had been tempered by Xia Lang's true fire, the strength of his body had skyrocketed. Now, if he let those in the refining of bones and viscera refining of bones beat him, it would probably be difficult to produce even the slightest bit of warmth. Only when a marrow refining realm cultivator hammered him would it be effective. The palm strike just now had produced a surge of warmth that cleansed his internal organs. It made his breathing extremely smooth, as if he had eaten an elixir of immortality. As for the poisonous gas contained in the palm strike, it didn't cause any harm to him. His body was like a profound weapon. Naturally, he was impervious to poison. Who had ever heard of a profound weapon being afraid of poison? This was a rare opportunity. Thinking that the 4 refining of marrow could beat him and help cleanse his internal organs, he even wanted to stop and let them beat him up. However, Luo Zheng had already seen the stone tablet in front of him. This stone tablet should be the goal of the viscera refining stage. As long as he could cross this stone tablet, he would pass the C test. Let's first turn the jade pendant red and pass the C test. A long night may cause trouble. Zheng dispelled the idea of stopping and getting beaten up. He went straight for